So thank you for coming in this early. By Delhi standards, I think this is an early session. The first session is always like a thin session, but I'm so glad to see so many people here. And this is really a great topic for a few reasons. One, you keep hearing about that the digital age is upon us. We've heard it for the last decade. We've heard it in different contexts. But I think, it's only in the last year or two, at least from my understanding, and I'd love to hear what my co-panelists think as well. We fully understood what this very fundamental transformation of our professional and personal lives mean, right? And I think that's made us all rethink a whole bunch of things. And I think for me, just to sort of lay the ground of the way, I work in a company that's very aggressively consumer facing, and we solve a lot of problems using technology, and we can't solve a lot of problems using technology as well. But I think, the three, four standout things to me when I think about the digital age or leading in the digital age. One, I think that leadership as we used to define it has very, very fundamentally changed, right? We are rethinking organizational structures, we are rethinking units, we are constantly changing the way we think about outcomes and matching structure, frameworks, and culture to make those outcomes the most impactful. The second thing, I think, for me has been very, very I think significant is that the building of trust, right? I think both with users as well as with employees, I think our relationship is based on trust. It's not based on hierarchy or titles anymore. It's very much based on trust and accountability. Again, the third sort of thing that I think about a lot is, in the past, you'd go get an executive MBA, you'd go somewhere and upgrade your skills. I think today, you're learning at 10x the rate at what you learned 3 or 5 years ago, right? Because we are all having to constantly be not just thinking about our daily, but we are thinking about the future and what it could be. The sort of last thing is, and here is where I think this juxtaposition of James and Neelam is particularly interesting, because on one hand you have someone who is phenomenally experienced in the India market, is sitting on 4 very diverse boards, and I'm very, very eager to get your perspective on how you think companies are dealing with this change, given the diversity that you see in the services that they offer and the structure and the legacy of these companies. And James, I think your thoughts on the way you define creativity and the way we have to be creative in the small and the large things, and how do you marry the immediate of the moment with our long-term goals, keeping creativity in mind. I'd love to hear these two perspectives. So over to James, or would you like to start? Okay. Neelam will go first, and I will circle back with a few themes again, as well as engage with the audience. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Durga. I'll use that mic if you're okay with that. So good morning. Can you see my slides? Okay. It's here. It should be there for you to see it. Anyway, let me start. Good morning to all of you. Thanks for the good introductions, Durga and Jonas. I thought I'll start right at the top. The question which many people ask and keep asking is, what do the boardroom conversations look like about HR? And then build it back to the talent and the technology, what we need to do. As Durga rightly mentioned, I'm on 4 diverse boards. And when I look at our conversation, there's not a single quarter where we don't spend time on discussing people, talent, HR policies or increments or something which is people related and impacts the organization in a big way. If you pause and think, why would a board talk so much about talent? We believe, and this is across all, I sit on a global board, I sit on a banking board, I sit in IT board, I sit on a online business board, all of them. The key realization which has come in over the years has been that talent and human resources is as important as the finances, as the customer relations, as anything else the company does. If the business has to do well, you need to have the right talent in the right place. And that realization has made it into a big boardroom conversation. So what do we look at? We want to have the optimal resources in the organization. We want the right resources and we want the right number of resources. So we do question how many are you hiring, why you're hiring, what profile you are hiring, right? So that conversation happens. And in a large IT company, it's all about, okay, should we hire 30,000 as TCS's article said, or some other big numbers. So still it's a boardroom conversation which happens. The other thing which a little realization is there, the succession to the CEO and the key personnel of the company, which could be the CEO, CFO, CHRO, could be the legal head or the business leader, is really important. Succession planning is something which we all think through repeatedly, maybe sometimes twice a year, without the management being in the room to say, okay, so the CEO is performing well, the CFO is performing well. What if we had to think of the future strategy and we need a change? What if one of them were to leave? What's our backup plan? I think every board has this conversation, so this is an important input for you. The other aspect which we talk about is retention, because clearly attrition rates going up is an indication that something is wrong in the culture of the company if attrition is high. It could be something is wrong in the business also when attrition is high, right? But the first doubt is on the culture of the company which has got created, and do we have the right culture? Are we engaging with the employees in the right way? So attrition and employee engagement scores are always discussed at least once a year, if not more often. And now, setting the imperatives at the board level, which is right talent, succession planning, attrition, culture in the organization, let me switch gear to the second part of my comments, which is on the talent which we work with today. And before I go on to the talent, I wanted to put this quote there for you. So it's something which we just wrote. I wrote with the person who was working with me, is to say, create processes driven by the experience, to experience, not experience driven by processes. It's a very important thing. Most companies have implemented SAP, HRMS or Workday, they have implemented, or some other tools they have implemented, right? And the processes of these tools are determining the experience which the employees have and not the other way around. We have to think those tools can frustrate the hell out of anyone. Sorry my language, I'll be careful as I speak, but they frustrate the hell out of you. You start thinking, oh my God, everything is driven by a process, and sometimes it's not an easy process to follow. In that environment, you have to think, am I creating the right experience for the people I'm going to work for? Should the processes be driven from the experiences we want the employees to have in the company? And that will make you think very differently. The population of people we are talking to is very different, right? I didn't know the word yuckies, you'll see on top of the slide, till I got doing to this slide. And yuckies is the young, urban, creative population. So I didn't know it, I'm just articulating it just in case you are hearing it for the first time. But the fact is we are dealing with very young people, millennials and Gen Zs, right? Everybody born after 2000 Gen Z. When we are looking at these people, the data shows, and this is not my data, it's a Pricewaterhouse PwC data, their study shows, by 2025, 75% of our workforce will either be millennials, obviously millennials will be there starting from 85, I think we are taking 89 or 85 depending on the company you're in as millennials to Gen Z. 75% of the population is going to be this population. And we need to think, and 2025 is, guys, 6 years away. I'm sure we are already seeing 50% plus Gen Z and millennials. We need to transform how we work with them and give them the experience which they want. You know, I was in a reverse mentoring session, and I find it very interesting because they address us as senior professionals, right? Like we look at millennials, they think we are senior professionals. I was like really excited to hear, at least they're not saying old and, you know, whatever. So, so I was mentoring this person, and he's a person of Chinese origin, working in Singapore, and I was mentoring him, and he was mentoring me. And he said something so important to me. He said, you know, he put design thinking on all this mentoring, and he was giving me. He says, what the millennials believe, the senior professionals are very techie. I was like, I fell off the chair. I mean, we think the millennials are very techie. Look at the apps they use. They live online 24/7. Maybe I still don't live 24/7, but I spend quite a bit of my time online. But they want to do everything online. And I fell off the chair. I said, why would you say that? We think you are doing so much. And he was talking to me about Shazam, Spotify before that, and the music I've never heard in my life before. And I was like, oh, wow, all this, you know, and I was listening to him. So he says, you know, the way you guys deal with SAP and SAP HANA and Workday and Salesforce.com, I think you guys are whiz. And I'm thinking, and I said, we think you're a whiz because you use all these apps. The technology is different for all of us and how we use it. They're most comfortable with not meeting a person, doing everything online, doing artificial intelligence and virtual reality or augmented reality, chat with chatbots than have a human being, right? So here we are thinking that both are very techie people. And the techies, which are senior professionals, are defining the processes, whereas they are looking at the experience. So that was the first thing. The second thing which came out in my conversations with this person, he said, you all believe that millennials want to be in a company for 3 to 5 years. And hence, all your conversations are looking at what I can do next year or 2 years from now. But if I get a good experience in a company, I don't mind. I want a job change every 2 years, but doesn't mean I want a company change every 2 years. So all of our senior professionals wrote down and saying, here is the talent which wants to leave the company in 3 to 5 years. Do I look at their career longer than that? Do I look at perks or anything which will keep them in my company longer than that? We have said no. Whereas they want excitement at work, true. Every 1 or 2 years there should be a change. But doesn't mean they need to change the company. So guys, we have to step back and say, if we are working with these people, maybe we have to have different interactions and conversations with them. And I thought I'll point it out because I found it very enlightening to have these sessions. Of course, the learning can go on in pages, but these two I thought I'll highlight to you. But when you look at IT today, and I can put it across to you, it is embedded in every aspect of HR, no matter which company you are looking at. It's embedded right from the way you select candidates to how you look at their journey through the company and how do you look at their retirals, their promotions, their role changes. Everything is AI driven. To give you an example, and this is so interesting, I was talking to the banking CIO and the CHRO, and then when I spoke to them, I was really excited. When you are hiring 20 to 25,000 people a year, if not more, it's impossible to meet every candidate. To get to that number, you may be having applications which run in few lakhs, and you will have interviews which may run into few lakhs. So how do you humanly do it if you have to do a good job? And that's where, ladies and gentlemen in the room, artificial intelligence is playing such a big role. Robotics is playing such a big role, as well as augmented reality. So now we are seeing a world appear where interviews are being done using web sessions, right? So whichever tools you use, you're doing web sessions. But hold a minute, even before you do the interview, there's an application. The application is being looked at through an AI engine to say, has this person got the right experience and for which job? There are chatbots, and I can encourage you to see on the IBM side the chatbot, which will look at your app and give you guidance and say, guess what? You should be applying for job number so and so also because your skills meet that requirement too. And we find 33% of the people are opting for the job role which the chatbot is suggesting. And the chatbot is doing just using artificial intelligence to say, these are the skills which this person has, these are the job numbers which need these skills, so how do I match it and give the right job offer to them? So it starts there. Then when you're doing the interview, it could be a human doing the interview on the web, or it could be a chatbot doing, or a bot doing the interview, it doesn't matter, because it's not looking at the words you use, the artificial intelligence looks at the tone you use, some of the key words which we want the candidate to use before you shortlist. And can you imagine the excitement of a person in answering the question, the tone with which he speaks, the words which you think are key words, which will express that this person should be shortlisted, and it's done transparently before you even get into any further thing. You know, in one of the sessions with the millennials, and I had around 14 of them in a room, and I asked them what frustrates them. They said day one frustrates them in any company. And I said, why? He says, you walk in on day one, you say, I'm going to contribute, man. I've got the job of my life. I'm going to contribute. And then you go in, they say, okay, fill up the papers. The papers will be 60 sheets, 100 sheets to be signed before you even get a laptop. And the laptop is not even there. So why can't the joining be online was the question. And of course, HR had this feedback. What if he fills and doesn't join and I have a laptop sitting here for this person? You know, those issues can be there. But what I felt is 90% of them are going to join rather than making them fill 60 pages. Can we give them the experience which they fill up online and then they join the company? I could go on, and I'm not too sure whether this time is for me to talk or this is the time of the session. So I think I'll just go on, otherwise I'll be eating into James' time, right? But what I'm trying to say is AI is there, and you should evaluate how does you use it in HR. You know, even through the career, when a person, you're looking at increments, at the increment time, given the number of years, given the number of grades which he has got, or ratings which this person has got, the system can throw up that this is, for this role, this is the range of increments you can give, right? All of us are using it. If not, just I encourage you to evaluate. It makes the life of the people managers so much simpler. So I do think there is so much of technology around analytics and AI and all the technology that is happening around us. We can use it. I can even use blockchain, and we have examples of how we use blockchain in HR, and that is going to make a difference. Let me come to a conclusion and say some comments. Today, everyone spends around 2.5 hours on average on their mobile phone. Mobile phone has become the predominant screen which everybody looks at. Is HR using mobile phone to be in touch with the staff, to be in touch with the people in the organization, to help them with the processes which they need to go through, even if they have to apply for a one-day leave or something? I think we should evaluate, because that tool everybody is extremely, extremely comfortable with. 2, everybody is on social media. If it's not on Facebook, which now it's got branded for people like us, but Instagram or Twitter, or there are many other tools which they are on, can we have communication on how good it is to be with us, with these people, and think about them using the social media tools to create this, establish a relationship with these people. And I think as we go ahead, we will see more and more new technology come in. But keep it in mind, you're working to give them an experience and not a process which they may hate to experience. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning. I get my slides up. Tomorrow I'm going to be giving a keynote all about super creativity, how we can augment our human creativity with artificial intelligence. But today I thought what I would do is go a slightly different route, because we're really talking about leading in this digital age. Let me start by showing you this picture. This is me. I was brought up in Scotland, a land of whiskey, golf, Braveheart. As a kid, my parents used to make me walk up the summits of the mountains near where we lived, but they used to make me walk up it dressed in a kilt. Now, if you don't know what a kilt is a traditional dress or a skirt that a Scotsman wears. So imagine for a second walking up these huge mountains in the rain and the wind and the snow while wearing a skirt. My parents thought it built character and resilience in me. The reason I tell you this story is this fourth industrial revolution that we're in just now is like a landscape that's slowly being flooded. But this is a landscape of human skills or competences. In the lowlands, we have skills like arithmetic, memorization. In the foothills, we have skills like chess playing, logic. And in the high mountain peaks, we have skills like emotional intelligence, resilience. What happened 50 years ago was the first wave of automation came through and it drowned out the lowlands, taking away many blue-collar jobs, but leaving most of us dry. But today, this flood we're just speaking about here, about artificial intelligence, is reaching the foothills. And those knowledge workers, like every single person in this room just now, is going to have to contemplate retreat and trying to get to higher ground. Creativity lies at the peak of this mountain, above the flooded plains and foothills. It's not just me saying this. In this age of this digital age, this age of artificial intelligence, someone asked Jack Ma the other day. Jack Ma is the founder of Alibaba, Asia's richest man. They asked him, what skills should we be investing in, developing in our young people, in our teams, in our organizations? And he said, don't bother trying to compete with machines on things that could do better, faster, and cheaper than you. You have to focus on that one skill which is uniquely human, your creativity, your curiosity. Creativity is about bringing new ideas to the mind. Innovation is about bringing new ideas to the world. Without creativity, there is no innovation. Without creativity, there are no new products and services. Creativity is the engine of innovation. In fact, this has been borne out recently by a study done by LinkedIn. They looked at what are the most important skills, job skills required. Obviously, the hard skills, things like artificial intelligence that we've just been hearing around, about machine learning. But when it comes to the soft skills, creativity is now the most important leadership quality, the most important job skill that's being required. So I would argue that in this digital age, this fourth industrial revolution that we're in just now, the role of the leader is to unlock the creative potential of their people. That's our jobs now. As a kid, I once asked my parents if I could have a dog. They didn't trust me with a dog. So they said, we'll give you a fish, a goldfish. Okay, try a goldfish. I came home from school one day, and one of the goldfish was looking a little bit sick. And I said to my mother, I said, what should I do? Should I give it medicine, or what should I do? Should I feed it different things? And it said, no. You change the water, not the fish. So a lot of what I'm going to be teaching you about tomorrow, in my keynote tomorrow and in the workshop the day after, is around the skills, actually teaching you about creative thinking skills. But I thought what I would do just now is teach you about the other side, the water. You see, if we have to unlock the creative potential of our people, it's not good enough just about teaching them and training them on skills. We actually have to change the environment, the very place in which they're working and they're creating and they're leading. The philosopher Plato had a great phrase. He said, what is valued in a place is cultivated there. if you want to cultivate creativity, innovative mindset to lead in this digital age, it has to be valued there. Around 10 years ago, I decided to start traveling around the world. Today I speak 50 times a year all over the world on creativity, innovation, and artificial intelligence. But about 10 years ago, I decided I'm going to go on a journey to discover what different countries and companies do in order to build this kind of creative culture in them for this digital age. The very first place I moved to Silicon Valley around 10 years ago. And the thing that I found really interesting in Silicon Valley, well, first of all, it's not a place. It's just a collection of places, which I never knew. And then when I went there, I found that they had something very intriguing. They had this mixture of competitive and collaborative. They had this ability to collaborate with your peers, but they also had this winner-take-all attitude as well. So Silicon Valley, I always thought they were very good at doing was around innovation, and they are. But really what they're fantastic at doing is synthesizing information. You know, the mobile phone, the cell phone was invented in Illinois and in Detroit. The World Wide Web was invented at CERN in Switzerland. Venture capital funding was invented in New York. But you bring all these ideas together and you combine and you put some great collaboration, you add some great design, great marketing, and you have the iPhone. It's quite evolutionary in that sense. So this is something that I discovered that lots of great creative places and creative leaders are very good at doing, about developing this competitiveness, but also this collaboration mindset. About 3,000 years ago, way before Silicon Valley, the most creative city in the world was Athens in ancient Greece. And the thing that made Athens so creative, so innovative of its time, was it had a certain type of freedom in the place. Now, when I say freedom, I don't mean democratic freedom. You can actually have very undemocratic places which are very creative. You don't need that. But they had a different type of freedom that was going on there. They had a port, it was called Piraeus. And what happens in any type of port, whenever you import goods and services, you inevitably import ideas with them. But what the Greeks were brilliant at doing is what they borrowed from foreigners, they would perfect. They took medicine from the Egyptians. They took literature from the Sumerians. They took the alphabet from the Phoenicians, and they combined them in a form of collaboration. And they used to get together. In these places, they were called symposiums. The word symposium just comes from the ancient Greek. It just means to drink together. The Greeks weren't stupid. They knew that a little bit of alcohol was actually quite conducive to the creative process sometimes. But too much is detrimental. So they used to water down the wine to 2 parts wine to 3 parts water, and they used to serve it in shallow cups. But what the symposiums were about was all these ideas were coming in from all over the place, and it was a place where they could debate, discuss, and challenge each other's ideas. So as leaders in your own organizations, what are you doing? And what kind of space are you creating so that people can debate, discuss, and challenge those ideas? This is an event like this. This is a modern-day symposium, but maybe without the alcohol. We were just hearing there about trust, the importance of trust. So you also need something else for somewhere to be creative, to be innovative. You need density and trust. About 100 years ago, a great creative city was a place called Vienna. Vienna was fascinating, had 2 great creative ages. Because you're all in HR, you will probably know this idea about migration, that people will flock to places where they can, it's called selective migration, where they will flock to places where they use their talents best. You see them, talent will often go to the same company because they want to explore what is possible for them. About 100 years ago, everyone was flocking to a place called Vienna. Now, Vienna had a leader at the time. He was very innovative. He was very creative. And they sucked in people from all over Eastern Europe. At that point, they had a terrible cholera epidemic. So people from all over Eastern Europe were coming to this place. Vienna, 100 years ago, 50% of the population was not native born. Whenever you have high immigration coming into a place, you inevitably have people crashing and conflicting. And in Silicon Valley, we call them disruptors. And it's something you want in a place. You want people to to rub up against things. Ideas need to literally be bumping into each other. But Vienna also did something very special. Not only did it have high population density, prisons have high population density, slums have high population density, soccer stadiums have high population density. Doesn't mean they're very creative places. But what it also had was intimacy or trust. And what they would do 100 years ago, they would have something called the third place. In Vienna, it was a coffee shop. In Vienna, 100 years ago, they had 600 coffee shops. This is where you would get together with people from different backgrounds, and you would get together to debate, discuss, and challenge each other's ideas, a little bit like we saw with symposiums. It's very important, if you want to lead in organizations, that you have these third spaces. They're not your work, and they're not your home. They're a place in the middle where we come around to challenge ideas. Only 18% of your good ideas will ever come to you when you're sitting in front of a computer screen. We can also use the very places that we work themselves as tools. We've been hearing about different types of tools. IBM is a tool. I'm going to be speaking about how to use Watson tomorrow. But we can actually use the very space in which we work as a tool. The ancient Greeks had a name for it. They called it the genius loci, this idea that places themselves can have their own creative genius. Now, I want to show you this. This is a picture. This is from India, the Indian Space and Research Organization. India is doing incredible things just now in terms of sending rockets and satellites to Mars, to all incredible places. But the thing I want you to notice from this picture, look at how the room is set up. Everyone has a common view of what the goal's in. Everyone can see the same things. Also, it's very easy for everyone to be able to communicate with each other in this space. This is, on the left here, this is the CERN Institute in Switzerland, where they're crashing the Large Hadron Collider. They're crashing the atom to find out the origins of us as our species and where the world came from. Now look at that space. They have circles. And then in circles, people then get together inside those circles in smaller tables. On the right here is the Bloomberg building. They've just spent £1 billion sterling on creating this office space. Everything is in circles. And then everyone does their individual work, and then they come together to do their debating and discussing and their collaboration in those small circles. Now I want you to compare this with this room. This is in the United Kingdom. This is the cabinet room with the cabinet at number 10 Downing Street, where the Prime Minister meets with his cabinet. How effective do you think this space is in innovation and creativity? Look at it. It has no tools. There's nothing interactive in the space. I know people that have been in this room and served as ministers. They said there's only actually really two tools in the space. One is the fireplace, because sometimes the Prime Minister will just crumple up the notes, the papers that he's been given by a minister and just throw them and burn them. And the other thing is the clocks. And they don't work. Not very innovative place in which to work. Now look at this. This is really worrying. We're going through this thing called Brexit just now in the UK. The country's decided to leave the European Union. This is the Cobra room where they make the decisions that are going to rely on the success of the United Kingdom or not. Look at this space. It's like looking at the early 1990s. I know people that have been in this room. This is the only known photo of inside this room. It's called the Cobra room. Look at this. There's no interactive tools. Inevitably, the decisions that get made in this room are going to be based upon who shouts the loudest, not on any qualitative data. So the places themselves can actually impact on how we lead in this space, the physical space itself. Creativity flourishes in places where it's valued and rewarded. Places like Silicon Valley obviously value innovation. Places like Vienna valued, and Athens valued philosophy, and that's why it was created there. What is the thing that you're valuing in your organization? If it is around creativity, if you believe, like I believe, and like the data shows us, that creativity is now the most important job skill, what are you doing in order to ensure that it's flourishing in your space? I believe the most creative cities in the world are going to be originating here, in India, in Asia, and also in Africa. I say this because You have high population density, like I spoke of before, high trade, entrepreneurial. It has all the factors required of the great creative cities. But what it requires from you as leaders is that you fully embrace this idea that creativity is the most important job skill, soft skill, that you need to be developing in your people. Thank you very much.
Okay, fab. I think very sort of different presentations, but very, very interesting. And you know, I find two sort of common themes, right? So one, both of you in some ways talked about the environment being important, right? James talked about changing the water of the tank before you think of changing the fish, and what does that mean? And you, Neelam, spoke about the importance of lateral movement and what is the redefinition of exciting for the young person, right? How can you make sure that that environment is exciting without losing the young person, right? And I'd love to get just some headline suggestions slash comments from you both in terms of practically how do you just kickstart this process, or how do you keep innovating in this process?
So, Durga, I think if we start with the kind of experience we want to give to people, I think we will be able to kickstart the journey on digital. You think about experience and then you say, okay, I'll do it on an app, I'll do it using this kind of a tool or something different. So think about the experience which a person is going to treasure as they come in the years.
Yeah, last week I have a podcast, and I was talking to a gentleman who designed the new intranet for Visa, for the credit card company. And I don't know if any of you, which the companies you work in, but what is your intranet like? What does it look like? Because if you think about millennials, Gen Zs, most of the time we're going to be spending on our phones. We're having this very immersive, talking about experience, this great experience. And then we go to work, and we go to this intranet that would look like it was designed in 2001, and it's not a very good experience. How can you innovate around that? So I think it starts at home, you know, essentially in the home office, that if that is your hub, that's your central place for dispersing and finding information, then I think it's useful to look at the intranet. And then how are you generating ideas on that? How are those ideas being floated? Is there polling, for example, going on there as well? So an intranet is a useful place to start if you think about the office environment.
So just two thoughts in terms of things we do at Zomato, which I think has worked to some degree. One is we've constantly changed people's workspace. You know, the minute you settle down on ground floor, we've moved you to the third floor. The minute you settle down in the third floor, we move you to the second. It is disruptive to begin with, but I think it can be very energizing and make you think of fresh to kind of rotate physical spaces constantly and not let you get too used to what you're doing. The second bit I think that has worked is because the app is so central to the goals, the culture, the way we think, there's a feedback process about the app with every build, which lasts nearly 2 weeks, from where we've identified people who might be in content, but who think brilliantly about product, who might be in HR, who actually write so well, we want them in comms. So I think there's a way in which writing and thinking and the way people think and express themselves, which can be a great benchmark for what their latent skill could be as well, right? Second quick question that I had to both of you was, you know, Neelam, you made this interesting point about this tension between technology and people, right? What precedes what? And I'd love to kind of push back on that and say, you know, Neelam, when we are going through so much change, right, there can be moments when technology leads that change, right, rather than re-engineering, or perhaps there is a moment where you say you must adapt or you must find other things to do, right? And what is that fine balance?
So it's all about seeing the technology which is coming and saying, how can I apply it in the work I do all the time? And that brings about innovation. James pointed it out correctly. Everybody is not just going to innovate and create a bulb, right, or create electricity, but people are going to use it in an innovative way. And that innovation at work comes in when you look at the technology and say, how am I going to use it to give the right experience to the population in the company? Now, we need to think about talent in the company just as we think about customer experience, customer relationship. If we don't think on that level with them, we'll always think of giving employees a lower level of experience, which is not a great thing to happen. So when you think about technology, think about how will it influence your employee relationships, employee experience, and how can you simplify the way you work. I think when artificial intelligence came and everybody thought about cognitive thinking and intelligent companies, everybody said, oh my God, they're going to replace human beings. But as we go through the journey in the last 2 years with artificial intelligence, we suddenly realize it is making us more intelligent and nothing else, right? So using it in the right manner is what I would recommend. So go into the depth of it and see how it can apply to your area of work.
IBM often talk about this idea of augmenting the human with technology, and I think that's a good way of thinking about it, about how we can augment what we do. I think we are, as a human species, we're kind of hitting up a little bit now with what our brain can take. So, for example, in humans, the maximum people that we can actually have any relationship with is about 150 people. I don't know how many Facebook friends you have. It's probably a lot more than that. So as humans, we're having to adapt all the time. I talk about this idea about super creativity, so deciding about which things you're going to do and which things the machine's going to do. And we're getting so comfortable with this. I'm sometimes wondering, is it the human that's leading it or the technology? Like this morning, I woke up, and I instantly said, Alexa, what's the weather like today? And I went, oh, I forgot I'm in a dumb hotel room, because I'm so used to having these things now. So it's changing how we're working. I'm always fascinated watching 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds play with iPads and apps, and you're just seeing how they're evolving with it. But I do think there's a little bit where as a species, we're starting to come up against a little bit of a wall in terms of what we can mentally take at this stage. And there's people like Elon Musk that are looking into things that we can maybe even change our brain chemistry and what's going on in the brain in order to level up.
Just one final thought, and I'm going to close this session post that. Just the one thing that you think is most critical in for a company to be adept at handling the future, right? And if you define the future as more medium term than long term.
So the future is all for companies which create a culture of creativity in their organization. People are coming in, as I put up, young, urban, creative people, yuckies, as they come to work, they don't want to do the same routine work every day. It's their creativity at work. Harnessing that creativity is going to create the right organization, give the business the flip it needs. So how do we harness that? And to create a company of the future, we need to create an environment, a culture, which encourages this.
I agree, absolutely. And also, one final thing is, I would say, as in organizations, we need to get better at asking questions. We have mission statements in companies. We will be the #1 provider in XYZ. Actually, I think we need to have mission questions. We need to get a time where we're actually asking bigger things, because it's questions that are going to reveal what the future is really going to be for us as a species, as companies, as countries.
Fab. Thank you. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Neelam. Thank you, James. I think both of them have back-to-back sessions. So thank you all. Sorry we couldn't take questions. But if there is an email or something that we can share with the audience, that if folks wanted to either ask James or Neelam any follow-up questions, it'll be great to circulate that later as well. Thank you.